Okay, hear me again. Again from the Fairmont, San Francisco. Great hotel, great lobby. Like, holy cow, fancy people in here. Lots of people dressed up. Must be some sort of events. Women in gowns, men in tuxes. I don't know, maybe that's just a San Francisco thing, but I'm pretty impressed. Nice hotel. Old hotel. Like I said in my previous stream, been here since 1908, something crazy like that. So it's pretty old. There's a new part on the other side. I'm pretty impressed. Like it. Nice big hotel. And believe me, if you know me, I'm in hotels a lot. So to this one, wow. Okay, maybe a little bit continuing on my previous one, where I was talking about using a WASP Zap hub or HUD. So the heads-up display built into the browser. The offensive JavaScript for red teams. If you if you're technical enough to understand how this all works, yet aren't experienced enough in what kind of attacks can happen in JavaScript, you probably would have run into the street screaming. It will, yeah, you probably would have been terrified. Dylan and Christian, I would almost liken them to a Penn and Teller kind of talk. Finish each other's sentences. Well, I guess Penn and Teller only one person talks, but that's the kind of conversation I kind of got with them, and kind of under their breath comments about each other, and it was a funny presentation. Good presenters. Dylan being I think a Kiwi. I'm pretty sure you said he was a Kiwi, and Christian being, I'm assuming someone local. But their talk was really about the lobster problem with application security. And I thought, lobster problem? What the heck's the lobster problem? Well, that's you protect the outside because, with a hard shell, and then the inside is soft and attackable, and as Christian said, very tasty. So they talked about something called Beef, so BEEF. It's a framework for JavaScript attacks. Something I had no idea. I'm not a red teamer. That's kind of why I'm trying to get into these events to learn a little bit more about red teaming. So that seems to be a big red team tool. There's probably 150, 200 people in the talk, and most of them put their hand up when he said who's used Beef. So apparently that's something I need to get into. But it essentially automates a lot of the kind of JavaScript attacks you want to do, and the way browsers protect you from JavaScript attacks is something called same origin protection, or same origin policy, so SOP. Normally I would think that's standard operating procedure, but this is more to protect you from having JavaScript executed from something that's not the same domain as you visited. So if I go to facebook.com, I shouldn't be able to execute JavaScript that's hosted on Google, for example. So there is some trickery that makes this happen, and DNS rebinding is one of the most common ways. So essentially, your browser becomes compromised, and I can make your browser think that Google and Facebook are the same domain because of the way the IP address gets assigned. And it's typically done through phishing. Interesting stats. I want to quote these numbers. I wrote them down, but I'm not exactly sure if I got them right. But 30% of users would open an attachment, whereas 12% of users respond to clicking on a link on average. So this is typically how they would infill and get you to execute that code, to do the DNS rebinding, and then they sort of start attacking you from there. The interesting thing that they went into is some stuff about understanding domain names. So if you've seen some of my presentation, I've used ReconNG. It's in the Kali Linux distribution, where I can go and figure out the domain names that are associated with a particular host name. So, for example, for F5, I could go and run recon ng, and it would go figure out all the different, vpn.f5.com or www.f5.com. But actually, they talked about a tool called Passive Total, where it actually is able to go and grab similar things. So things like f5net.com, which you may not know exists. So they did this for Netflix, not because they were targeting Netflix, but they just used Netflix as an example. And all kinds, Netflix.co and dev Netflix, not dev.netflix, but devnetflix.com or something like that. So they came up with dozens and dozens of these different links, and these are ways that you can figure out what kind of tools that they're using. So they typically might have like a Kubernetes.company.com or a my sales tool.mycompany.com or something like that, and then they would go figure out, well, what's my sales tool? Oh, cool, that's something that's compromised. There's something I can go here. Oh, this is probably something that people run on their home on their devs would run on their machine, and so they would write JavaScript that would execute and execute across the network and try to access other people's instances of these tools. And this is all aided by this beef tool. So it's very interesting and also very scary. And I know I'm well beyond my 5 minutes today, but the one last thing I want to talk about is cert transparency and virus total. So virus total is a great tool. You go and you would scan a tool or scan a file that to see whether there's a virus in it or something. They go against multiple different virus applications. The problem with that is quite often it would be able to figure out your host names in your home network and that doesn't seem like a big problem because you're like, I just ran a scan. It's ephemeral. No one's going to look at it. Well, apparently, VirusTotal sells the data that when you scan, so it's actually possible for people to get your host names, and that then starts to get things where they're going to find out like, oh, you have puppet.mycompany.com or something like that, and now they know why you're running Puppet. You're probably running Puppet in the dev environment, so it's probably unsecure. It's behind a firewall. No one protects it. The lobster problem. So that was the thing to take away. And cert transparency too. A lot of times certificates expose internal server names, and that's another way for people to figure out what you have running in your networks. So thanks for joining today. Like and subscribe if you can. And I got more coming from for this week. And actually now I'm going to be visiting all the RSA events as well. So I'll be posting from RSA and continuing tomorrow on some things from BSides San Francisco. So signing off, thanks very much. Signing off from the Fairmount San Francisco. Hope to see you again. And again, like and subscribe and worry about that lobster problem. Lobsters aren't a problem, they're tasty. Thanks, bye.